We're going live to Colombia as the second day of the Hague Group emergency ministerial meeting continues.
Of all who cherish international law and justice to start taking practical steps in order to force Israel to stop the genocide against our people, especially in the Gaza Strip, and to comply with the historic advisory opinion of the ICJ, which declared, among other things, that this prolonged occupation is illegal and it has to be terminated as soon as possible. And the General Assembly legislated that this illegal occupation has to end in 1 year, and it called for convening of an international conference concentrating on action. And I want to express our appreciation and admiration to His Excellency the President when he wrote that fabulous article in The Guardians emphasizing that the essence of this conference, to be followed by other conferences, is action-oriented. You cannot tell me you vote for me in the General Assembly, which I appreciate that for Palestine or the Security Council, but you cannot take action in your national capacity. Take action in your national capacity and under your own obligation in connection to your commitment to international law and the principles enshrined in the Charter of the UN. This is the time that each and every one of us, each country in their own sovereign, taken steps not to arm Israel, not to allow ships to stop in their ports carrying weapons to Israel to kill Palestinian children. We appreciate all of you present here, including civil society and the massive media who are with us to unleash from Bogota this initiative. And I sincerely hope that it will affect in a massive way our deliberation in the General Assembly in New York starting on the 28th. This time is the time of action. This time is the time of freedom for the Palestinian people. This time is upholding international law. This time is victory for the Palestinian people, and I thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor Ministro de Estado.
Thank you so much, Mr. Riyad Mansour. Next, we have the Special Rapporteur of the United Nations on the situation of human rights in the Gazan territory, Palestinian territory, Mrs. Francesca Albanese.
This is because you told me not to put the bag on the floor. Signor Presidente Pedro, colleagues, what a momentous 2 days we have had. My heartfelt gratitude goes to Colombia and South Africa for bringing us together, and to the Colombian authorities and people for the incredibly warm welcome. There could not have been a better place for this gathering. I also thank the members of the Hague Group, all the courage and commitment, as well as the Secretariat and all participants, from state representatives to civil society, particularly those from Palestine. You should all be proud of the steps you have taken. What began as 9 countries in the Hague Group has gathered here 30 states fundamentally aligned with the need to end the impunity of Israel. And this is an unprecedented shift for Palestine, as Ambassador Mansour also said. The six concrete measures agreed by 12 of you reflect the political courage I urged yesterday. These are not just measures. These are lifelines for a people under relentless assault and a world that has been paralyzed for too long. And let me pause. It is not that I think that the final text is perfect and beyond critique. I drew, for example, the critical and the contextualized reference to the two-state solution at a time when 32 years of two-state solution solution discourse has led to the genocide we witness unfolding. Because Palestinian self-determination, reparations and return are not up for negotiation, as the International Court of Justice has declared, and this should be the premise of any political discussion. Nevertheless, the measures that have been agreed are to be absolutely welcomed, and now all states must implement them. Commitments to arms embargoes must turn into urgent policies and then domestic legislations enforceable by your judiciaries against all those who work to circumvent these commitments. Second, no safe harbors and arms shipment commitments must turn into regulatory enforcement through proper due diligence by state authorities on all those who travel through an jurisdiction. Third, that special rapporteurs have been calling for since the 2024 ICJ advisory opinion are a significant commitment and must lead to the review of your free trade agreements as a whole, and transparent and concrete action that actually severs the two-way trade and economic ties that are entrenching Israel's presence and enabling its genocide through normalization, material support and profiteering. Fourth and last point, the commitments to international and domestic prosecutions must also become domestically enforceable mechanisms with built-in review process and concrete. Excellencies, I know that many in this room and beyond in public and private institutions are hesitant to stand up to one of the fiercest powers of our time. But as someone who comes from a place plagued by the mafia, where the logic of intimidation has mirrored, tormented and killed those who stood for justice, I can tell you, that logic cannot withstand and can be defeated by the unity of the people and the unity of struggles. By doing the right thing, you will find solidarity, and through solidarity, strength. Look at me. From the unique place of both vulnerability and strength I occupy today, I tell you, it's not the blow that knocks you down. It's the refusal to stand up to it. Excellencies, the genocide in Gaza is a defining moment for our global society. Quote, people take for granted what a child makes of things. The words said to me this morning by my sister in arms, Tlaeng Mofokeng, the UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health. In her words, quote, what is happening in Palestine and what is happening around it is shaping who we are, just as apartheid and the anti-apartheid movement shaped who I am, as I fought against it when I was 8 years old, and I saw others fighting for me. End of quote. What I want to say to you today, dear ministers, ambassadors, colleagues, and friends, and President, is all contained in the truth. The truth is that Palestine has already triggered a revolution, and you are part of it. Palestine is reshaping the global clear line between those who stand against genocide and those who inflict, defend, and profit from it. Millions are part of this growing movement. Some others just with rage or despair, not yet active, not yet mobilized, but it's just a matter of time. They are searching for principled leadership, leaders who value human dignity over strategic alliances, community over conquest, and who bring humanity back into international law. And if states remain merciless, the people will take these struggles into their own hands, and we cannot come to that. What we need now is a new multilateralism, as I said yesterday, non-hierarchical, rooted in shared humanity, and capable of reflecting a moral courage of nations across the globe. After all, even the United Nations is United Nations, not United States, and the United Nations Charter speaks of we. Hague Group, perhaps without fully realizing it, starts to embody that leadership and that multilateralism today, where profits can still be pursued, but not at the expense of human life, where multinationals and their grip on politics somewhere cannot result in strangling life elsewhere. You only have to look at here in Colombia to find this reality. Last year, Colombia issued a very powerful presidential decree to halt coal transfers to Israel. And it is Western corporations like Drummond and Glencore, long complicit in imperial and neocolonial violence, who defy it. funneling coal through intermediaries to fuel Israel's annexation and genocide. And this must stop. While it should have long been our shared goal, this multilateralism we all need is now finally taking shape. I hope to see it flourish into a new way of being, where Western values of reason and democracy, of what remains of it, meet Asia's traditions of unity and diversity, Africa's Ubuntu, the sense of human interconnectedness, I am because you are, and Latin America's magical realism rooted in indigenous cosmologies, ways of knowing and ways of being. Western people have so much to learn from other people and nations, starting with healing as a necessary part of political processes. It might be only the beginning, but we must begin somewhere, and state-wise, the Hague Group is that somewhere. May more states and bold actions follow, so that together we might stop the massacre of the Palestinian people, uphold the integrity and full application of international law, dismantle settler colonialism, its manifestation and underpinning ideologies once and for all, and in so doing, lay the foundation for a more just and global order. Borrowing the words of Indian writer Arundhati Roy, I tell you, another world is not only possible, she is on the way. And on a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. I hope you can hear her too.
Gracias a la relatora especial en...
Thank you, Special Rapporteur for Rights in Palestine, Mrs. Francesca.
We listened to some statements that were being made after the closing of the emergency minister that was being held in Colombia by the Hague Group that began yesterday and continued today, a meeting that was addressing the importance of putting an end to the genocide in Palestine. We're listening to some statements of Riyad Mansour and the UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese. Let's now continue to see what's happening right now in Colombia.
Conference. This is both a tragedy and an honor. It's a tragedy because it's already too late. This emergency conference has been convened after 67 days of its genocide, live streamed to our phones and televisions every single day. But in the words of Simón Bolívar, in whose salon we've met and deliberated concrete measures over the last 2 days, a people that loves freedom will always be free. And when tyranny becomes law, rebellion is a right. Cuando la tiranía se hace ley.
When the tyranny is law, rebellion is a right.
One thing that I've learned in the last 6 months of building this rather audacious, perhaps crazy project of the Hague Group is that the threat of punishment is used over and over, not just against the peoples of the world or social movements and unions, but against states, for states to retreat to a language of pleas, to retreat to a language of condemnations, of calls and of demands, rather than of action. If there is one thing that defines what is different about the Hague Group, is that we believe in protagonism, not supplication. At the beginning of yesterday's meeting, I said, there are often moments in history that mark a before and after in their wake, and I hope that this emergency conference is one of them. After the reading of today's joint statement, I believe that we know that it is. Today marks the end of an era of impunity and the beginning of collective state action. It was my honor in January to welcome 9 nations to the Hague Group. It is an even greater honor to welcome 30 states, governments of conscience, to Bogota today that have brought the spirit of the Hague Group into Salon Bolívar. And I'm sure that this honor is only going to continue over the coming weeks as both the Hague and the concrete measures that we seek to pursue only receive greater and greater support. I want to return back halls in the rooms of where it all began, which was the Peace Palace in The Hague at South Africa. Historic genocide convention case against Israel, where one of the lawyers, and many of them would often say to each other, we know when we've been successful, in the words of Bobby Sands, our revenge will be the laughter of our children. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias a la secretaria ejecutiva.
Thank you, Special Secretariat, Mrs. Marsha Gandhi Kota. Ladies and gentlemen, In this moment, now the President of the Republic of Colombia, Mr. Gustavo Petro, is going to talk with you. Regards to the ambassadors, diplomatic body, chiefs of accredited missions in Colombia and in other countries, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mrs. Rosa Yolanda Villavicencio Mapi, who was also a migrant in Spain and who became a socialist leader in Madrid. General Secretary of the Department of International Affairs and Cooperation of South Africa, same number. Minister of State of Palestine, Mr. Riyad Mansour, Riyad, sorry. Executive Secretary of the Hague Group, Barsha Antikota, Special Rapporteur of the United Nations on the situation of human rights in the Palestine territories occupied from 1967. I should say from 1948. Mrs. Francesca Albanese, officers of the national government, media, national and international media in general, to all the people here in this room. We were born on April 19th. On April 19th, Colombian people cried for freedom. On April 19th, I believe, I hope I'm not wrong with my memory, Palestine rebellion. Precisely when the occupation started. On April 19th, we stood up in rebellion. And I think that there are other April 19th along the history. And these perhaps gather us together as people that in different parts of the world have risen up in rebellion because we want to be democrats and free. And in the world, there is more and more slavery. As time goes by, those that rose the flag of democracy has become slavists. New slaveries, as Pope Bergoglio, my friend, said. Francis, who was also a rebel. And it was because he felt what was happening spiritually in the whole of humanity. We're going to barbaric times, but we can also move to freedom. All the dialectical philosophers, Chinese Lao Tzu, I just heard the same philosophy on the Guambian people from Cauca when they named Barbara as a member of the Colombian Academy of the Language. That is not a small feat. And I read her text just presented, expressing in a flawless Spanish the philosophy of the Nisak people and the ancestral indigenous people as well. And this philosophy is just dialectical, built without knowing Hegel, without knowing Lao Tzu, without even knowing Heraclitus, even older. Philosophy that has been with me to make calls. Everything moves on the principle of contradiction. Therefore, a positive has its negative. Light, an area filled with light can become dark. Everything can turn into an opposite. Otherwise, the story wouldn't move. Nor the universe, because the principle is universal, it seems. In the universe that we see that comes from the past, everything, including the moon, because light travels in space, as Einstein said, we see light and darkness. And we are always in charge of seeing beyond that part of the darkness becomes light. We can detect it. It's a light that was launched many years ago, thousands of light years ago. But sometimes light disappear because worlds died as well, enormous worlds. We know that, and we don't know if they come back to be light. Some physicals said that it is the case, but here we are in an infinitesimal point of the universe, and so it seems the only one with life, or at least smart life or intelligent life. How many light years around us we can see, and there is no life? It seems so. And it seems that we cannot talk but only the idea of Diogenes, that everything else is belief. And the lantern of Diogenes doesn't show life in the universe. We are alone, unique. And it seems that in the universe there is an intelligence that is energy. Because even darkness has energy. Energy all from the space and others, but there is one special, the one that inhabits this planet on mammals or on a species world, and among them human beings. The only ones with the immense responsibility in all the universe of the intelligence of thinking. We are thinking animals, and that thinking is developed more and more in its main essence, which is the brain. Every time that a baby is born, the jewel of the universe is born, their brain and their heart, in a package that we call human being. And if the human being and the human brain that was acting alone, in order to be able to survive in the planet with the cold that we have, there is an experience that was just experienced here in Bogota. To be able to live, they had to help each other. And helping each other is the secret that allows us to thrive and sometimes, for worse, dominate the planet, the only place where life thrives. It seems so. So helping each other, it's our secret. But this aid has two big ways. It's an aid that is born from the heart, from the feeling, to be more accurate, because we are sensitive and the mammals help each other as some other animals do. The ones that survive help each other. The bees that go in a hive, they feed by helping each other, sucking the honey and finding it. Sometimes they die for it. And this attraction of the honey, of the bee with the honey, we can call it survival instinct. But in mammals, it's called love. What we feel to help each other is love. And without this, we cannot live. The neoliberal in the last stage of the great capital are being destroyed, and the feeling of barbaric stages are just an expression of a capitalism that is capitalism only in paper. As we were talking when I had a feud with Macron, that the GDP measured in dollars and euros, GDP that not everything is production, has 110 trillion per year, and the public debt has 230 trillion per year. It's going to collapse. I don't know when, but it's going to collapse. It's collapsing already. Capitalism is not more than a world of paper. but it has the virtue, or the dark virtue, to take us to the barbaric times in its own collapse. Barbaric times that are really dreadful, but there are two. The one of the climate change and artificial intelligence, as Hopkins says. Not because having an AI that is not necessarily live, but what are we producing in the universe, but that must be under control of the live intelligence, and not from a country, not from a mega rich capitalist and crazy guy, but it has to be under the reins of humanity, live intelligence of humanity. Otherwise, humanity is going to end. Maybe the world can be very productive, but then again, we're going to unravel. And Gaza is just an experiment of mega rich trying to prove to all the people of the world, how do we respond to a rebellion of humanity. They want to bomb us all. The ones that are in the south, but we're going to end up, as in Guernica, bombing themselves with foreign weapons. And this perspective of slaughtering kills the multilateralism that we should find the cities, kills the idea of a global world, an international world. I have requested a meeting from SELAC with the government of the United States, and they haven't given not even a single answer, because they don't want to get in touch with Latin America and the Caribbean, because they know that working with each one separately, they are stronger. So they are not dialogue-y. They didn't talk. They threat, as it happens to us often. Some are scared of threats. Some have become so accustomed to these that we are not scared anymore. And the history has been like that in our people. Histories of rebellions and barbaric times. And the possibility of these is felt here, but also dialectically speaking, the possibility of having a different humanity. The link together, and we survived, because the other way of helping besides the heart is thinking. And Newton's parable and Robinson's Crusoe parable would be lie. Will be only illusions that we feel. We live amongst ghosts because capitalism is a ghost. And sometimes we believe the idea of this ghost. Just ideas. Newton couldn't create his gravity theory without algebra, without the Arabs, without the Romans, without the Greeks, without the Egyptians, without other people that in America, as we knew, had a more profound idea of mathematics. They were calculating the stars, the planets, more than even the same mathematicians. In Latin America, we have marvelous things that want to hinder the America, because the America was reduced to just a piece, a part of the American continent. In Americas, we had people for over 30,000 years, and they created art. In Brazil, 20,000 years until we have the data, and places close to Bogota, to the Amazon jungle, Chiribiquete, that I want to open to the world, and there is a fine documentary about that, something magical between the jungles and the colored birds, enormous murals as we haven't seen maybe in any other part of artists. By generations, they take their brands and their ideas, their hands as people that were there forever in the humanity, in their history. 20,000 years our ancestors bear, and maybe even more. And yes, they, with some laugh and mocking from pseudo-economists of the cachacos, as we call the ones that are not from the Caribbean, but that is also here close to this place. 6,000 years ago, there was a people that we didn't know where they were coming from. The genes are not in the places where we have survived. And all of them died. They didn't have any descendants. Maybe the women died for a reason, maybe first, because in this land with so much water, that group disappeared. Maybe they didn't help each other, maybe their loneliness killed them. A lack of water, Bogota, not now, but some weeks ago, Bogota was without a city with 9 million inhabitants because they burned the Amazon, and it turns out that the water that arrived here was from the Amazon jungle, and it went to great lengths, and the vegetation also turned the steam into liquid water, and we ran out of it. Climate crisis, the second fact that can finish the humanity, and we all know.
A climate crisis that is rising. Let's look at the dialect speech behind this. We are in the region with most extensive oil exploitation in the region, and we have our national oil company Ecopet to perpetrate fracking, and I have called for intervention of said company to preserve the natural beauty of Colombia. Here we are a reservoir of animals. Many animals migrate here, and that was discovered when we lost Panama and they built the Panama Canal. And my sincerest respect for Panama, but we used to be a united nation as well as we were with Venezuela. And if we follow along the ancient borders of the Grand Colombia that almost reach Nicaragua, it almost covered most of the Caribbean. Most of current nations wanted to our yellow, blue, and red flag. And Haiti wanted to rebel. And with all due respect to my Haitian friends, the first free territory of Latin America was founded by Bencos Jongo, and there is not a single monument to him. There is a monument to Belarcázar Conquistador in Cali, but he was perpetrated genocide. So this is all about the dialectics on how the free people made statues and monuments for those esclavists, slaverists. We should honor those who fought for freedom, and our first liberator that we had record of are those of those indigenous people. And here we celebrate on the 1st of this month the freedom of Santa Marta at the hands of the indigenous peoples over 500 years ago, when the first vessel reached that coast and they founded the first Spanish city in the whole of Latin America, close to Santa Marta. That also has to do with how histories are being told. So there was a slave revolution and they fled. And they tried to pursue a different way of life, and they founded the village of San Basilio de Palenque. And this government recognized it a legitimate town because the elites of this hate that we support those who fought freedom. So we have to honor this heritage. Sometimes I say to North Americans, why bring the Statue of Liberty all the way to York, and we can install it in Cartagena resisted a siege for over fighting for their freedom, being one of the cities was heavily affected by slavery, along with Havana and Veracruz, Mexico. And today, Havana, Veracruz, Mexico, and Cartagena are being governed by the people that believe in democracy, that believe this idea that Diogenes lantern should shine bright. So I just wanted to read history to come back to the present, because history combines together. So out of Haiti, the first revolution under the flag of equality, fraternity, and solidarity. Here, my friend knows how to pronounce this in French better than I would. What says, but those who were fighting for that cause were also oppressive states. Back then, Washington was an oppressive state. And now, going back to our liberator in this same palace. And I can those who fought for the freedom of this country. We have the biggest contradiction. You cannot cry for freedom if you're oppressing others yourself. Here, allow me to that this palace used to be the home of Republican presidents of Colombia. Many oligarchs, slave traders. 1851, once Bolivar and Santander passed away. They used to live here until they abandoned home. A home such as this, a home one that I didn't have it, that wanted to imitate France, but homes sometimes don't have a soul. So here in this very palace, we have seen a very simple room that used to be the room of the first president of the Republic of Colombia that we had. Our liberator, Simon Bolivar. He's not a liberator, he is an emancipator. He is the son of, but he knew how to dance with Afro-Colombians because apparently he knew how. Apparently, he, as many Colombians who have African ancestry and that carry dance and rhythm in their blood. So he was able to fuse two cultures. And there are other monuments such as Alhambra that fuse Arabic and Spanish culture. Back then, you could see the history that Arab women would throw rose petals from me, and these rose petals would fall into water fountains in the gardens. So out of those Arabs that were defeated militarily and fused their blood with the inhabitants of Spain, then we got sailors from Spain visit Caribbean coast. They were the first to Santa Marta and to Cartagena. And that's why Colombians also have Arab heritage. And we can say that we have all different types of blood in our veins. Arab blood can also come from sub-Saharan origins. This is ancestral blood that is over 3,000 years old. And sometimes we've been told there are movement restrictions in the Americas, that there are certain regions in Latin America that are inaccessible by Latin America. So some Mexicans can even around Alcatraz state because they're not allowed to access their own territory. I even had a tense situation with President Trump in which I returned a plane with so-called deported immigrants. They were in chains, and I was outraged by this because I was thinking that slavery had ended. Didn't Bolivar say that we needed to free? Didn't Bolivar tell the founding father of the United States that we need to be free? Even though they were slaves, they didn't raise the flag of freedom before the French people. So that is a huge contradiction. We have liberators who turn slave traders. And when we talk about our Colombian flag, half of it reflects the Haitian flag. That was by Black people who were also slave traders. So we know that the Colombian flag comes from the Haitian flag, as well as the Venezuelan flag, the Ecuadorian flag. They are yellow, blue, and red. I think that history is what we've been told. That's why our flag reflects Haitian history. The flag brought over by Haitian generals. They were the first ones to design this flag. And after this flag became a sign of freedom. And here, it came triumphant, but it was also betrayed right here in the same home when our liberator Santander was victim of attempt. History says that Santander flew out of a window and he fled down that was around this property. He used to be in love with a Spanish princess who died here because she wasn't able to tolerate the climate here and climate conditions such as mosquitoes. So I can say that love saved him back then. And then he decided to free himself. You're more vulnerable, and he died alone. When you flee alone, you know that sometimes you're gonna have strength. So when we work alone, we are more vulnerable to death. So only when we join forces, we can be so. Here, we have some people from the Caribbean. The Caribbean is not a land of pirates. It's the land of freers, of rebels, which slave traders. And the Caribbean needs to remain free. Slaves, when they were brought from Africa, they will jump out of the vessels, swim to the shore. They founded their own nations along with some indigenous people called Garnes or Raíz population, having most of the islands of the Caribbean. And they will refuse to be enslaved. They were never slaves. They have a perception of life. We are also Caribbeans, and we also island in the Caribbean is called San Andres, founded by free peoples. And because they were free, they joined to Colombia because they saw the land of freedom here in Colombia. Someone promised full freedom of slaves in America, and they didn't fulfill their promise. We are victims of new slavery. Migrants are sometimes living under terrible conditions. We've been gaining terrain in the organization of American States, Laura Hugh is here present. She is a Colombian, and she's an expression of that. We were not defeated, but now the inter-American human rights system that was our torch, I was elected president thanks to them, fell under different administration. And it was due to a rupture of progressive government in the continent that we are still the majority, that we were able, even though we fight, we lost the efficiency or the spirit of the inter-American human rights system. Priorities changed, and we cannot lose the idea of freedom embodied by all of these Caribbean nations. We need to be united, and we still have the memory of Grand Colombia, the great nation that we need to rebuild. If the Latin American region reunites, it's because the Grand Colombia came together to work together. And if the Grand Colombia is divided, Latin America will never be able to integrate because they are opposing forces, and there are certain dialectics that are being applied. So yes, we need to help Haiti as they back then. And what we were told by Mr. Che Guevara, one of the most universal Argentinian citizens, where you see injustice, we have to fight against it. It doesn't matter where in the world. That was something attempted by Bolivar. Anywhere in the world there is injustice, we need to fight it because we stop being human beings. And the message by Che Guevara is still present by ourselves. Only inhuman people will label Che Guevara as a murderer. Justice and the right to rebel is necessary when in the face of tyranny. And nowadays we're being governed by tyranny. Those who used to be the Democrats become slave traders. So the paradox of Haiti, whose Napoleon army was defeated in Haiti, our battles against the Spaniards cannot be compared to the rebellion of former slaves in Haiti against the Napoleonic state. And that's why Macron was angry that a president from the South, came to teach him that you can be sitting in Paris and turn your face to injustice. I love France, of course. I'm very fond of them because those of us on the left wing of Colombia believe us to be French or be heavily French influenced, and we learned French. And most of the most important revolutions started in France. They're no longer in fashion, but I hope that we have a revolution. But now the focus is here in Latin America, and we're not French. But of course, we have the longest line of descendants of the Roman Empire. But here, We also have vengeance and love, as Bolivar lived in this very same house. And this is a contradiction faced by the Italians as well. We are also facing that contradiction. But yes, let me not delve into that. But I want to say that we're the heritage of the Roman Empire, but we're also descendants from ancient cultures, ancient Latin American cultures. Although we shouldn't be called Latin America because we were not of Latin origin. We represent the world's diversity. Anyone who lives in Bogota or in any region can find a man or a woman who reflects ethnicities from all over the world. And that's who we are as a people. So we can interact, we can belong to mankind. And that's why we try to reach agreements. We try to avoid war and conflicts unless we are forced to it, as we were to do it with North Korea. Since 1948 to this date, 700,000 Colombians have been murdered due to political reasons and due to greed. And sometimes for a passion or love. Sometimes we died of love by ourselves. And that was reflected in the Nobel of our Nobel Prize, 100 Years of Solitude, that reflects 100 years of conflict of people that has been affected by civil war. And the only way in which we can attain peace and beauty is to stop being isolated as peoples. We have isolated because we've seen 700,000 assaulted in our history. It's almost 10 times the number of victims of Gaza. Our children have also perished. We've also been victims of bombardings over our peasant people. So one president who was a descendant of slave traders, that in order to extinguish communists and to avoid having a second Cuban revolution, they needed to bombard farmers' associations. And we replicated the scenario that Guernica of Spain, Guernica. And then those affected people fled to the mountains, and they wanted to overthrow the oligarchical state. And they almost win the revolution, but due to the vices of the fighters, they were not able to achieve their goals. We also had our Nobel Peace Prize, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, to Colombia, try to defend freedom, try to defend books. So those who support killings, to support death as descendants of Latin Americans, end up perpetrating horrible crimes. So here we're hoping to end our solitude, our isolation, and that's why we want to come together with the whole of Latin America, with the whole of humanity, and have a dialogue with President Trump, because he has refused to talk to us. But of course, we have to talk to the Americans because they will be here for thousands of years to come, and we will be here for thousands of years to come. So we have to understand each other by using the way of dialogue, as opposed to using the language of bombs. South America has a huge potential for renewable agencies, so they can decarbonize the whole of the energy, full of the fossil energy matrix of the United States. And this is something that we're not talking about, and that will solve to a great extent the issue of the climate crisis, and that will protect life. But we're not having the conversation. The United States, they do not believe in climate change, and we see how they've been affected by floodings in Texas. And even in the capital of capitalism, where at the downtown area in Brooklyn and Down Street, you can smell marijuana being smoked. When they kill 1 million of Latin Americans in the war against drug because they were exporting cannabis. So we bear the death and they enjoy the pleasure. So that is a huge paradox. And they want to continue killing us, exterminating us, and we are defending life and we need to speak up. And now I move forward to Gaza and then I will end my speech. But of course, history is infinite, it never ends. Okay, so we have experienced Gaza in our blood. We have also been invaded. Some Colombians might be outraged when the peoples who have been suppressed by tyrants rebel. We can criticize Hamas, but we cannot criticize the Palestinian people. They do have a right to rebellion because their land was occupied. Our Colombian lands have been occupied twice. Once by Spaniards a long time ago. Some of our islands were occupied by the British, by the French, and Panama was also occupied by North Americans. And they took away our territory. It is lucky that we didn't disappear. And an occupied nation deserves to rebel. Rebellion is not a political crime. It's only a political crime when it affects the tyrant. And now they name the rebels terrorists. Those who engage in rebellion are not criminals. I was almost once prevented from raising the flag from Bolivar, which was green and black, and Bolivar was carrying this flag in his fight against Spain. And General Murillo ended up having a conversation with Simon Bolivar. But they continue the war, but they brought a human perspective to the war. And that's why we still have Spaniards living amongst us, because they also have a right to life. So back then, Bolivar understood the rights and the dignity of his opponents, the Spanish opponents who didn't want to return to Spain. But what this flag represented was freedom or death. And I don't know where he came with this idea of this flag, because Bolivar ride his horse through all over this country. And in the back then, Spain wanted to be Republican, such as Colombia. And Bolivar lifted these flags that were red and black, or green and black. And that is what represent freedom or death. And because we don't want to talk about that, we'll say freedom or freedom. So that flag loses its black color and it turns in red. So here we want to stand for freedom and the protection of life. Europe went to a very difficult time after defeating Hitler. And now they are electing Hitler's sons and daughters. And they are repeating what was back then the speech of Hitler. We are superior if we are white, and we reject everyone who has a different skin color than ours. when that is what Hitler was doing back then. How would it be possible that partisan peoples of Italia would adopt similar speeches? They have all types of people, Christian, communists, and those who survived the Republican Spain, and those who first marched in a liberated France were anarchists. An anarchist movement who was defeated in the past, and then that they were enjoying freedom against the enemies of freedom.
Where is Europe now? So we have a series of tasks and questions that we have to fulfill. The largest mass grave is not in Latin America, but in the Mediterranean, precisely where democracy was created, or at least the word as such, in Athens, filled with corpses of migrants trying to reach Europe. But why they have migration? Because they made the world poorer with the colonies. They are the ones that empower the others, so they are the slaughters of the humanity. And the way out to leave these and to get the flags again, to bear the flags again, say that the progress must reach the south. Africa can also decarbonify the energy matrix of Europe. And Chinese are doing an immense effort as well. I have seen that from our side, but I decided to put Colombia in the Silk Route because we weren't threatened or insulted there. Hope it goes well. And now we are part of the universe. We're part of the world. Now we are not so lonely. Now we can leave the violence. The Mediterranean, where we have the Palestine, because Mediterranean is plural, where Jesus was born, who was a Palestine. The place where he was born is under threat, and it's Palestine. And we don't understand that. That message now from Jesus is that there are no chosen people in Palestine, not Jewish people. It was a religion, not an ethnicity, because they were Palestine as well. They were born in Palestine. Not the Christian white from the United States. They are not the chosen people. From the voice of Jesus when he took the sellers from the temple, the peddlers from the temple, he decided that the chosen people of God is humanity, is the only ones with a thinking brain, thinking of what we have thought about the universe. That's why we are the chosen people. We all are the chosen people. Doesn't kill with each other. The day that every human being is free in the planet, there will be no wars. We think on the stars, ad astra, as the Romans said. We said ad astra too. And humanity moves around the universe bringing life. And the inert world is going to become something vital, thinking with a free brain, helping each other. And it will be our destiny if we defeat today's barbaric, heinous situation. And this is done only if Palestine is free. We met with the Palestinian guerrilla from the Palestinian Liberation Front, the movement April 19th, the Bolivarian movement, and we trained together and we learned things together. And it was in the desert of Batraba in Libya where Gaddafi was alive. And the Swapo from Namibia, who is here, was there. And they were part of the National African Council. And they were from the Polisario front that spoke Spanish, Arab, because it's another people that were conquered, and Greeks. So a series of guys, because none of them were old, they gathered together from Latin American, Panamanian, and from Africa and the Middle East to train us for a war. Finally, we ended up making peace, dialectically speaking. Mandela, Arafat, M19 in Colombia, and almost all the Latin American guerrillas. We gathered together to prepare for a war, and we ended up creating a peace for the world. And that's where Palestine were with us. Nobody has wrote that book. I have asked people from the M19, the still surviving ones, to write it because part of this history, because tells different things, that progressive men and women are universal. It's not something from a small place. They got together with the world. They crossed the ideas of fight against tyranny. Two of my friends died there. Two of the dearest, Hernan Laura, who was completely tore apart, and he was a poet. And I tried to recover his poetry and his songs. I tried to have someone on the internet to put it in new technologies. I'm Francisco Vargas. And many died, but there are some still alive. Why don't we write a book that is a book of world solidarity from rebellion? And a member of the M19 now is a president, and now we are sons and officers of Bolivar. Officers of Bolivar, one stepped into the front. Vanquish or die. Now it's vanquish only, as Bolivar said eventually. We have to vanquish, we have to win. So we have to make calls, tough ones, facing dark times. I was betrayed in this palace. Again, history is repeated again, because I said that not a single ton was going to move to kill Palestine. My government, white officers coming from Labists, took making the idea of this innocuous. It wasn't Drummond. They took advantage of this, but the one that did this were paid by the Colombian people and in other ministries. So very Santander, they set a trap, the same that when Santander well Bolivar in the second floor of this home. The tradition that we have in each other, solitude maybe started that day when Santander was going to kill Bolivar, and it was saved by a woman, by Manuelita, who was Ecuadorian, and from leper, they said, and we are not revindicating Manuelita's science, revindicating Policarpa Salabarrieta, who was the first guerrilla lady in Colombia, on top of some indigenous that even infatuated some Spaniards, because all the ways of fight, of struggle are possible. So saved us, and I hope that they can save us again, because we're about to being extinguished again. The front line in the fight for life, I hope. They ride a horse like Manuelita, that said that she was the Turkey loved ones. They did the lives, and Manuelita and some others, those generals, is the time, because the woman is the one that takes life for life. We have to do that.
We listen to some statements from the Colombian President Gustavo Petro, who was addressing the closing of the emergency meeting of the Hague Group, addressing the issue in Palestine and to demand an end to the genocide being committed by Israel against the Palestinian people. Before, the President of Colombia was referring to the statements he was pronouncing, giving a brief history of the record of oppression and colonialism that the world has experienced across different regions. He was making in particular in Latin America, also referring to the parallelism of the different colonial empires that have existed throughout history. We also heard the statements of the UN Permanent Representative of the Palestinian Permanent Representative to the UN, Riyad Mansour, who welcomed with joy the holding of this emergency meeting of the Hague Group. He also said that he supported that international law. He called on all those that support international law and all that are against the genocide, that this was the moment to take steps to end the Israeli genocide and to take concrete actions to counter what was happening. He also called for the support of the ICJ and General Assembly advisory opinion to end the occupation in a year's time. Let's now go back to the Colombian President Gustavo Petro.
Yeah, so they are called like strategic partners. What do we do in NATO? If the main chiefs of NATO are sided with genocide, what do we do there? It's not a time to have a military reset of the government, of the world. There is not a Latin American army. Can't we have a Salvation Army for humankind? That makes the ideas worth. Because we learned that this was a military and political at the same time. Hegel said that first we have the ideas, then the cannons. Otherwise, the ideas are just fodder for mice. We don't write books for nobody to read. We write them, and beautiful, but they are meant to become a reality. The one that creates, as they said. This fantasy has become reality, and Aureliano is ruling Colombia now. And we have moved the young butterflies. Here we are, the heart of the biodiversity of the planet. And here we have a story older than the United States, creating realities. We left the reality, and now we are thinking with the world. The ones that were beheading the kings now are kissing us and hugging us. There is another reality on motion that we have created in our dreams. Caribbean created dreams that became truth. The Caribbean calls us to dream, but also to make the dream true. What do we do in NATO? Isn't it a time for another military alliance? Because how can we side with armies that send bombs to children? Those are not liberation armies, those are darkness armies. So we need to have light armies. We need to gather our armies and think the things properly, because we cannot have Israeli weapons, and they are arriving here. And the Ministry of, and these house, in the Chancellor's office and other ministries, even officers that were so-called communist, helped to put obstacles to the president with a two-words figure that I can't remember the name, that made empty the prohibition of exporting coal. And Glencore and Drummond are taking 60% of the coal that Israel needs, because we are the fifth coal exporters of the world, and the world of law and the country of Libya wants to kill the humanity. I don't want to export coal, and nor to explore more gas. And the last oil reserves are being depleted, because that kills the humanity and kills everybody. And we are forbidding this exporting, and we have traps within the same government. And the Chancellor has the order of changing this decree at once. Forbidden. We have some magistrates that are not understanding my words or the new reality of the world and defeat the present orders. I'm facing a lawfare, as many people know. The more persecuted person of a country is the president. I said that I'm also a slave myself. I went to write my book with a yellow bougainville with a beautiful sea, and they said that I was with the largest delinquent of Ecuadorians, and they were trying to kill me in the press that tells lies because they are owned by the rich ones. We have to leave NATO. There is no other path to follow. And the relationship with Europe cannot go with people that help. Other European people are not helping, with European governments that are betraying their own people and they are helping to throw bombs. And Colombian coal is not going to become bombs in Israel to kill children. If they are going to raise our tariffs, other people will help us and they will buy our products. Colombia buys Palestine olive oil, not to Israel. Palestine make it, Israel put the brand. Colombia buys to Palestine and don't sell to Israel. Not because we hate Israel. I believe in the two-state solution. I'm from that solution. I think that the world allows Jewish for some years and people coming from Arabs because they have some Arab heritage that was in the Bible. So they call us anti-Semites, religious terms. And when I read where Zen was, it says that it's a descendant both of people that were called from Arab people and some others from the Jewish. And it was the same people. Jewish and Arabs in Palestine is the same people and they have the same origin. They don't have to kill each other because they will find only the solitude that Jesus found when the Romans that were not from there killed him. Well, from NATO we have to leave it. We have to set up an army of light with all the people of the world that wants it. And we have to tell Europe that if they want to be with Latin America or Africa, they must stop helping Nazis. And we have to tell to the North American people with all colors to stop helping Nazis. There was a coalition of government, the coalition of light. Some are reds, and they had this flag, and they arrived before anybody else. And Hitler died, killing himself. And some others were bearing their red bars, and came also almost to Berlin. And some others were the people of Europe fighting with the cold, with Hitler, and some others were the Chinese. And it was the same fighting against Hitler and their partners and releasing their country. And some other people did the same. We did a great world coalition for humanity. Hitler died. His ideas are still permeating the dark armies. But why aren't we creating an army of light? Because in the end, if they don't pay attention to us, if our call to dialogue doesn't stop bombs, if Guernica continues everywhere, I know how tough are these words because a former magistrate from Cauca was attacked and Cauca was of his leave and was a part of freedom. We're going to extract. They were asking Mossad to take the president of Colombia by force. Well, you might try. A woman saved Bolivar. Maybe that happens to me too. But we cannot be silent. Salvation Army, that ideas are not taken by rats. And these armies starts in the Caribbean or another part of the world. We have to be together so that they respect us. It doesn't happen to us. We can surrender the weapons. Al-Fatah did that. Nelson Mandela did that many of the ones that alleviate the threat stop using weapons. We use our words, we use magnificent examples of peace, but they have to respect us. Our voice is not a clown voice. Our voice is respected, and the ones that are bombing have to respect too, and that is military and political as well. And we had to. And if it's only political, let's hope that we don't use the military part. But we had to. Then our Hague Group has to go beyond too. Has to go beyond. Otherwise, it's not going to stop the genocide in the world, and the barbaric thing is going to continue. We want a population-free world, and we want all to be free. So it's up to us. And I finish shouting, "Free Palestine! Long life, free Palestine!"
We were listening to the closing statements of the emergency meeting held, the ministerial emergency meeting held by the Hague Group in Colombia, in Bogota. We will listen to the statements of President Gustavo Petro, as well as we listen to the statements of Riyad Mansour, the UN, the Palestinian permanent representative to the UN, and Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur to the occupied territories of Palestine. In a clear message to calling an end for the genocide against the Palestinian people and to call for more decisive actions that are going to begin to be taking place following the closing statements, the final declarations of this emergency meeting, to put an end to the Israeli aggressions and crimes against the Palestinian people. Those is what was happening in Colombia. We will have more in the coming news briefs.